ever been. 187 pounds, and I was going to Tops Club, take off pounds sensibly. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of Tops Club. It was before OA, and so I met this woman there, and that was the best part of going to Tops Club was I met my friend Mary Lou, and we became close friends. She had small kids, I had small children, and she would drive over from another town about 50 miles away every Monday night, and we'd go to Tops Club, and then we'd go just get coffee or hang out and talk to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, she could not lose the weight. I wasn't doing really too well. I mean, like I said, it was my fifth time working on the same 100 pounds or more. And so she called me one day and she said that she'd found a doctor over at Big Springs, Texas, that did the bypass surgery, bariatric surgery, the very first. They don't even do it today. Was a very, very dangerous surgery. But anyway, she was going to have it. And so the day that she went, I called her husband and I said, or he called and told me that she was, there and all. And I said, well, if she wakes up out from under the anesthetic, if she comes through the surgery, call and let me know because I'm going to have it. And he did, and I called the doctor, and then probably a month later, I had it. I didn't do any research. I had no idea what it would do. What I had in mind, what I thought was going to happen, is that I could eat anything I wanted and wouldn't gain weight. I mean, music to my ears. I mean, duh, I've been looking for that all my life. And that wasn't really true. But what happens with that surgery, they make you like a straight gut and everything that you eat goes straight through you. It causes massive diarrhea. But after a while, after several years, and I did lose a lot of weight on the onset, but after several years that the body wanted to restore itself, and so the diarrhea slowed down and the weight loss or the weight gain began to come back. And I got into laxatives, abusing laxatives, and that's when I became a bulimic for 13 years. A very severe bulimic, laxative, diuretic abuser, and which had almost killed me. My colon was falling out of my body. My liver was shutting down. So I went off to treatment, and I'm coming up on 40 years. But I went off to treatment September the 19th of 1985. And what I learned there was, about that I had a disease, and I was I was working as a program director of a drug alcohol treatment center at that time. And they did for me in California what I did for my clients, my alcohol and drug clients. How they treated me was as if it was a disease, the eating disorder, and it is a disease. And they treated me like it was an addiction. And from that point on, I came home and I've been in recovery ever since. Now, back to why I was sick last week. After I had the surgery, probably a year, maybe not that much, I started having severe arthritis. But it was a strange type of arthritis. It was very sporadic. I'd have it and I wouldn't have it. I'd go to a doctor, they'd send me to a rheumatologist, they'd diagnose me with rheumatoid arthritis, and then I would go a month or two and not have any sign of it. This went on for years and years and years, and it got worse, and the spells, I called them spells, got worse. And I would break out in a pimple of festered boils on my shoulders and my hips. And it was the strangest thing. No one knew, no doctor, no rheumatologist, no one knew what was wrong with me. And I didn't know. But when I would get sick, my family knew to just put me in the bed because I'd run 103, 104 fever. Cam and I was in New York City one time up there doing probably a TV show or doing something, and I got sick in the restaurant, and she like to never got me home. It comes on like that. And the only thing that would help it is taking steroids. And you can't live on steroids. But anyway, by the grace of God, my doctor sent me to a rheumatologist in Scott and White. And when I got there, what she said, I wasn't in an episode, I'd come out of one, and what she said was, the next time you're in one of those episodes, go to a dermatologist and get those biopsies, those places on your arms and your hips, because I've never seen that in arthritis, never seen it. So the next one I had, I called the, at that time, I mean, it was the only dermatologist we had in Abilene, called, and he couldn't see me, but he had a brand new little doctor there that could see me. He'd been there 1 week. And I want to tell you, God does work, and I've been praying for answers for years, because I would get so sick I couldn't get out of bed, and I still had, at first, still had children at home. And those 3 days that I would be in bed, I'd be deathly ill, and I don't care what was on the calendar, I'd have to go to bed. So I went in there and I started, the doctor looked at the pimples, and he started looking at my paperwork, my history, and he said, you had that bariatric surgery in the 70s? And I said, yes. And he had been out of school, out of Texas Tech for 1 week. 1 week. And he said the last thing they studied, and his professor said, you'll probably never see a case like this, because most of them that have had that surgery have died. You'll probably never see a case. And what it was, and they call it, you can look it up. You can look it up on Google it or chat that AI, they have the most information on it. And the acronym is BADAS. I mean, and it is. It's BADAS. BADAS. You ought to look it up. And that little doctor told me, he said, Mrs. McCarty, you have this syndrome. And he said, very few people, only ones who have it, have had that type of surgery. That's the only ones that have ever had this. And he treated it for steroids, and but through the years, now that's been 15 years ago, I guess, and through the years, I have gotten better, and nothing's changed. There's not anything I can do, but I don't know of what it is, but the episodes are farther apart. They're not as close together as they used to be. In fact, I have not had a really bad one for 3 years. And I was down at Florida at a conference with Misty. We went down there to hear Ashley Judd speak. I got deathly ill, went to the hospital. Anyway, long story short, I wound up in the hospital here in Abilene for about 8 or 9 days. So I haven't had another episode until last week. So 3 years. And that is record. That is record. And I think what I make up about it is that I take such good care of myself. And I am so particular about what I put in my body. Yes, there's times that, I'm like Wimpy on Popeye. I love hamburgers. That's my favorite. I could eat a hamburger 3 times a day. And they're not all that unhealthy, if you cook it right. But, and I'm due one. I haven't had a hamburger in a long, long, long time. But I contribute not having those episodes quite so bad as maybe I'm outgrowing them. Maybe I'm getting too old for them. I don't know what it is. But I do take very, very good care of myself. But last week, I started getting sick, and I can tell when it's coming on. And so I spent about two days in bed. And when I get like that, I can't do a thing. Nothing, zero, I don't care what it is. I go to bed with fever and just every joint in my body. I had knots on my arms and shoulders. It's severe. It looks like severe rheumatoid arthritis. And then I get over it and the swelling goes down. And I do have some knots, but not, just little knots. My hands do not look that bad as far as someone with bad rheumatoid arthritis. So I'm telling you that, particularly since we're going to be talking about obesity and childhood obesity, I'm telling you that because there's not a lot. I didn't know. I suffered with it all of my life since 72 and had no idea what it was until, that's why I'm hoping someone, if anyone is that ever watches this, maybe by chance will watch this video, and maybe if they have suffered from it, they'll get that information. But like I said, there's not many of us left that have had that surgery. They sort of outlawed it, I guess. They quit doing it. It's a very dangerous type of surgery. So many from our area around here had it and died, and some of them ate through it and all this and all that. So anyway, that's why I was sick last week. Eating disorders are a disease that keeps on giving. And if it's not treated, regardless of what the eating disorder is, if it's not treated, it will show up in every area of your life. It will show up physically, and how it will show up physically is the body begins to break down. If you're an overeater and you're overweight, you're carrying around excess weight, your body is it's not designed to carry around excess weight. Our bodies are not, and it breaks down in heart problems. And the thing about obesity and severe overweight, morbid obesity, and that's been 80 to 100 pounds overweight. The strange thing about it is you can be morbidly obese and not have the severe medical consequences of it for years. You can go along there rocking and rolling, and you can say, well, I'm an overeater and I know I'm overweight, but I'm healthy. My doctor says I'm healthy, and he can or she can tell you that you're healthy. But one day, all of that's going to come together and your body's going to begin to break down. And because it cannot carry, our bodies are not designed to carry the kind of weight that, 50, 75, 80, 100, 200 pounds. The body's not designed to carry that much overweight. And so the time to treat it is now. Now is the moment of power. But I also wanted to talk this morning about childhood obesity. And I was a very obese child. My obesity, like mine, like I'm claiming it like a shield, but the disease of obesity started with me at age 4. Now, all children who are overweight, I say all of them, I think something happens to a child, that something emotional, something is said to a child, something is done to a child as far as, any kind of abuse. It can be something harsh said from a teacher. It can come from a parent. It can come from different directions that tells a child, you're not quite as good as those other kids. And if you come from a family of addictions, if you come from a family where there has been overeating or any form of over-abuse of any substance, you have got the physical and the mental makeup of an obese person. Particularly if you come out of alcoholism and you choose not to drink, you very much can turn to food. People turn to food for different reasons. Children turn to food for different reasons. Now, I will tell you, and I want to go out on a limb here, a real thin limb. and say, if for parents who have obese children, I think it's child abuse, because children cannot buy the food. They can't get, now I did, because as a child, I'll tell you a little bit about that. Majority of children can't go buy their own food. They don't have the money. They can't go shop and buy all that junk that they eat. They can't prepare it. They can't bring it into the home. And this is where parents come in. And if you live in a home where you have a lot of sugary sweets and you keep cookies and you keep this and you keep that. Now, I'm not saying that it's not okay for kids to have a cookie or 2 or 3 cookies, you know. My grandson Spencer, I can't talk about cookies without saying this, but he had this kids show, and it was about this little boy that was a dog walker. And Spencer and I watched that movie a million trillion times. And one of the dogs was a boxer dog. And this boxer dog loved cookies. And they were all talking dogs, and only the little boy could hear him. And he would say, I want a cookie. I want 2 cookies. I want 20 cookies. And that's how I got like that dog. I wanted 20 cookies. So I'm not saying that not to let children have any sweets, but I think they have to be monitored. I think they have to be, it has to be talked about. And not a lot of talking, just say, this is how it is. Guess what? You are the parents. You are in charge. You know, as younger parents, and I'm speaking to the choir here, our kids are all grown, but I'm hoping that some young parents will hear this, because if you want to know who holds the key for childhood obesity, it's parents. It is parents. It's no other, and the schools. It's parents and schools, but primarily the parents. And, you know, one of the things, the children that are obese are usually malnourished. Think about that. They're malnourished because that obesity, they don't get obese from eating green beans and broccoli and, you know, potatoes and a good protein, and they don't. That does not cause obesity. Now, if they eat, you know, 3 or 4 helpings at every meal, you know, and the potatoes are fried or the potatoes are creamed with lots of butter and all that, yes, that can, you know, you're overfeeding them. So it is up to the parents to, I mean, if you want to know where it starts and where it ends, it's in childhood, is in the home, inside the home. There is no other place. Or your babysitters, you know. And so the causes of childhood obesity it's very hereditary. It's like alcoholism. It's like any disease. It runs in families. Now, not everyone can get it. I mean, you know, like I had a sister. She passed away about 4 years ago, and she took after my dad. She was very white complected. I mean, white complected, with blonde hair that you could hardly see the hair. She was so blonde, you know, blonde hair, blue-eyed, thin, and that's always what I wanted to be when I grew up. You know, she got on planet Earth knowing how, I don't know how, but how to feed herself in the same home that I grew up in. She knew how to feed herself, and she wouldn't eat with us. She wouldn't eat what was at the home. She would bring her own food in, even as a young teenager. Of course, she was young because she got married at age 16, but I would notice her, and if she might gain 4 or 5 pounds in the wintertime, but come spring, she would get that off. And how she'd do it is she'd buy little old bitty things of ground meat like that. And this was a kid, and she would broil that for herself, and then she would fix her some broccoli and she'd eat the whole package of broccoli, and that's what she would eat until she lost that 5 pounds. And she really pretty much kept her weight off until finally she gained some weight. We were probably in our 70s. Thank you, God. She got up to about 60 pounds. Ooh, I just loved it. Anyway, I'm joking, because she was thin all of her life, and she didn't keep that weight on very long. But she was a thin-minded person, and so was my dad. My mother was not. My mother never got enough of anything, and she taught me enough. There's never enough, of anything. Whatever you go after. I mean, my mother did not ever get enough of whatever she wanted. That included men, beer, whiskey, food, whatever it was. She, bless her heart, never got enough. Thank God I didn't get way far into the alcoholism like my mother did. But anyway, so it starts at home, obesity does, and it is hereditary. You go back and look generations, 3 generations, and it is some in cultures. We can see particular nationalities. There'll be some that are, more prone to being overweight than others. But you go into their homes. And see what they're eating. They're just not born overweight. They get that way after they get on planet Earth, and it comes from what they're being fed. I mean, so it's also about an unhealthy lifestyle of, and we can. It used to be TV, now it's screens where kids sit on those screens, telephones, games. They spend so much of their time, and particularly your obese kids, they are into those screens, and they become, very professional in working those screens. But they have to sit while they're doing it. It's a sedentary lifestyle. And then the emotional eating, like I said a while ago, there's sometimes that there is some form of trauma that happens to a child that will trigger their eating. And that's what happened to me. I was, up till the pictures of me, up till I was about 4.5 years of age, I was not obese. I was just normal sized kid. And then I witnessed some trauma. I witnessed a horrendous thing that no child should ever witness. And I've told y'all about it. My mother had an affair, and I witnessed my father cutting the man's throat from one ear to the other. And I had told the secret about the affair. So I started carrying the pain of my mother and the anger of my father when I was about 4.5 years of age. Here at Shades, we talk about the carried feelings of parents. When we get people in and to do the type of work that we do with them, very seldom do we work on anything. We might start working on something in the present day that's happening, and we'll see how a pattern has formed. Therapists love to look at patterns, and we'll see how a pattern has formed in their life. If they bring in a lot of anger, we'll see that there's a pattern of anger or sadness or whatever, emotional breakdown or whatever. But invariably, so what we do here is we take them back to their childhood. And invariably, there will be something in their childhood that has triggered something in them that tells them that they're not worth anything, or I call it that no damn goodness. You just don't feel good about yourself. And it doesn't have to be a whole lot of anything. You take a sensitive child and you say something to a sensitive child. Children, what is said to children goes to a child's heart, and particularly if they are a sensitive child. It will go straight to their heart, and they will begin to carry that the rest of their life. And for those of us that find food to help ease that, You know, when I was telling my dad the secret about my mother's affair, he bought me a sack of candy. Went into a grocery store or a liquor store, bought me a sack of candy, and got him a little half pint of Old Charter. My father was not an alcoholic, but he would take a swallow of alcohol, I mean, every 2, 3 days, but he was not a heavy drinker. But we were going to talk about secrets, and I started eating that candy, and I never got enough the rest of my life. By the time I was in the first grade, I weighed 8 pounds more than I weigh today. 8 pounds more than I weigh today in my adult life in the first grade. By the time I was in the fourth grade, you know, I weighed about 180. By the time I was 13, way over 200. I'm talking about morbid obesity, folks. And, you know, it just kept going. There was never a time in my childhood or in my young adult life that I was not obese. Never, ever. And you know what it comes from? I wanted it to be some kind of medical problem. I wanted so much to be sick, and that that I was just eating like all the rest of the people, and everything I ate made me fat. That is not true. Now, there may be a small sliver of the population that will have a thyroid problem that don't take it on if you don't have it, but very few people have a thyroid problem that causes them to really gain weight, you know. Anyway, I'm not a doctor and I'm not going to go into that. But what made me gain weight was massive amounts of food. And I couldn't get enough to ease that pain on the inside. That's what I was trying to push down, was the pain. Now, not every child has the kind of severe childhood that I have, but I've worked with a lot of people that have had pretty bad childhoods, and you know, then they will choose something in their adult life. If alcoholism runs in the family, a lot of them will become alcoholic, a lot of them will become drug addicts, a lot of them will become, you know, overeaters. Or they'll go the other way and have, you know, and not eat and have the anorexia. So I called Kim, my daughter, a while ago, and as a child, I always knew that I wanted children, but I didn't want fat kids. I never wanted to bring a fat child into the world because I knew what it was like to be a fat child. You're made fun of, or I was made fun of, every day that I went to school. They never let up. They never got off. And, you know, there's a survey made, and I've told y'all this before. There was a survey made among fifth graders asking the 10 things that, or maybe five things, that they fear the most in life. 10 things, list the things that they feared most in life. It wasn't parents getting a divorce. It wasn't sickness. It wasn't any of that. The number one thing was being overweight. The number one thing that kids feared the most was being overweight, because they watched other their friends or people that they went to school with that were overweight being made fun of unmercifully. And a lot of times, overweight kids won't talk about it. They won't go home and talk about it. They go home and eat over it. They won't talk about it because they carry that shame. They won't even tell mom and dad about it because they feel so embarrassed about their body, about the weight, and then teachers will even say things to kids, or coaches will say things to kids about their weight. It is not fun to be an overweight child. So I made the decision, when I have children, they will not be overweight. Now, after I had my first son, my only son, my first child, I was overweight, and I wrote in his baby book that I was going to go home and lose weight. I had was already in the process of divorcing his father, and I was going to go home and lose weight and find him a daddy, and I did exactly that. I went home and I lost weight, and I mean, I weighed probably 10 pounds more than I weigh now, but it was the thinnest I had ever been, and I didn't know what to do with that thin body. I did not know. I weighed about what I weighed in the first grade. I did not know what to do with that thin body. I mean, I would be, I was only 18 years old, 19, and people would, men, I'd be attracted to men. Well, I had never been attracted to men. Most men don't like overweight women. Now, some strange guys do, one of them real overweight. I don't know, that's a whole other thing. But most men don't like overweight kids. Girls or women are picking out, a bride. They don't pick out the overweight ones usually, and so the minute my husband and I married, I started overeating, and by Christmas I'd gained all the weight back that I had lost. We married in September, and so through my kids' childhood, and we had three daughters, had 4 children, then raised his 3. So we raised 7 children, 6 to 7 most of the time. And now there would be times that we wouldn't have his older kids. But what I'm saying is I fed a lot of people. I was determined that I was not going to have overweight kids. So I called Kim a while ago, my daughter, and I asked her, I said, tell me how, I just interviewed her just while I was getting dressed. I said, tell me how you were fed as a child. And I'll tell you, I don't have overweight children. I have one daughter that I went through a divorce and gained weight. She's the only one that has ever had a tendency to be overweight. But she went through a divorce and she gained some weight and she's lost it and she's not, anyway. But I was determined I was not going to have overweight kids. And I had enough sense to know it was the food that I was eating as a kid that made me fat. So I proceeded to find a way to feed my kids a healthy way. And if it sounds rigid, it might be. But, it was in the 70s, and women stayed home. A lot of women stayed home and cooked, and made meals. I cooked 3 balanced meals a day. I cooked breakfast, I cooked before they went to school, and I packed their lunches. And in the summertime, I cooked lunch. And I would cook dinner, and we would have dinner every night. You could mark your clock by it. By 5:30, I'd have the meal on the table. And Kim was telling me that, and I had a bell out on the back door in the summertime. I'd ring that bell when it was time for them to come in, because they knew it was supper time here. They'd all fall in, and what she was telling me, she said, Mother, you fed us so good. And really made me feel good. But another thing that I did is and it's kind of started because I was feeding so many people. And I was feeding toddlers at one time and teenagers. And so if I didn't fix everybody's plates, the teenagers would eat the toddlers' food. They would overeat it. So I got started early on fixing everyone's plates. So everyone had their plate fixed by the time they got to the table. And Kim said she would always go in. She said, Mother, you would have a candle on the table, you'd have flowers on the table, you would have placemats on the table, and and I did that. I was Martha Stewart before there was a Martha Stewart, because I wanted things to look good. And we had a looking good family, I'm here to tell you. But I fed them, and Kim was saying, she said, Mother, you never talked about food. Now, I was overweight, but my kids very seldom. The only thing they ever saw me overeat on was the peanut butter. I did my overeating at night, and I kept my stash in the trunk of my car. I'd get them to bed. I'd go get the food and I would iron. I took in ironing when the oil business was bad. I'd take in ironing. I would iron all night and eat all night. And, I ate myself up to 287 pounds. But I didn't overeat in front of my kids. I puzzled everybody. My husband, my little skinny husband, would say, I don't know how Tennie can be overweight because she hardly eats anything. Well, in front of him, I didn't. I did not overeat in front of anybody. It was my secret, you know. And I didn't eat up the kids' food. I would buy stuff and put it in the car, and it would be junk. It would just be awful food that I put in my body. So I was asking Kim about mealtime, and she said, Mother, and I'm embarrassed to even say this, she said, Mother, you need to give yourself some credit. She said, you can teach people how to have children that are not overweight. None of us are overweight. You taught us not to be overweight. And I said, well, how did I do that? She said, okay. She said, what you would do is we ate 3 meals a day. And I would fix usually some kind of dessert for dinner, and it would be, a Jell-O salad or whatever, something like that. But I would do, it wasn't that I forbid them for eating sweets, but I would put it into the meal time. And then I joined Young Homemakers. I wanted to learn, and I wanted to know how to feed my kids properly. So I joined Young Homemakers, and we studied about nutrition. Another thing I did, she said, Mother, tell them about getting us in 4-H. I got my kids in 4-H, every one of them. And what they learned was about nutrition. I didn't make them. I was one of the leaders, so we did cooking. And even my son did cooking. He won a blue ribbon with his chili one year, So I did that with the purpose. It was a very social thing at that time. We had a lot of fun as a family. But my main goal was to help them learn about nutrition. I knew that they would probably get it more learning from someone else or letting me be the teacher as a group, than at home. So Kim told me a while ago, she said, Mother, you did a lot of things right. And she said, I can remember looking at my plate, and there would be the meat, and there would be the starch, and there would be the vegetable, and there would be a salad, and then at night would have some kind of little dessert. And a real treat would be if I made a little Texas chocolate cake. I did that maybe once a month. I didn't forbid my kids from having sweets, but I did. And she said, you need to tell them that, Mother. What I do is I would buy in bulk at things to put in their lunches, like those cupcakes, chocolate cupcakes and all. And I would lock them up in the freezer so they wouldn't get them. And it wasn't that I cared for them eating them. I cared for them eating them because I didn't want them to be overweight. I was and I never mentioned the weight to them. I never mentioned it. I just fed them appropriately because I wished I had been fed like that. As a kid, I cooked my own food. I'd go to the store. Mother'd give me money. I'd go to the store, buy junk food, come back and feed me and her. There was no structure. Kim told me, she said, tell them about the structure. She said, Mother, what you've taught us is structure. She said, I still have structure today. I eat 3 meals a day. And at noontime, we all know that Kim has got to eat at 12 o'clock or her tiger comes out. She gets all really irritable, restless, and discontented if she doesn't get to eat at 12 o'clock. But she said, anyway, she said, Mother, I want you to go in there and I want you to brag on yourself, and this is not easy to do. But I taught myself, and I would read every nutrition book I could get my hands on, and there wasn't a whole lot of them. But the gas company would have little monthly or bi-monthly seminars about nutrition, or the electric company. I had to go downtown and go to those little seminars because I wanted to learn how to feed my children where they would not be overweight. I was on a mission, folks, and I cooked a lot, and I cooked often. And their kids, their friends always wanted to come to our house and to eat. And I asked them one day, why do you like to come here to eat? And what they said was, because Mrs. McCarty, you have food. We don't have food at our house. And if we do have food, it's just that junk food stuff. And so kids really want to be fed. I think they want to be fed healthy food. I don't know. But anyway, I'm really talking this morning. I hope there'll be some young mothers listening. If you want to raise a child that is not obese, feed them properly. And it is up to you to do that. And it is up to you and I think, to present the food. And I know in today's time it's hectic and it's easy to get DoorDash or this dash or that something, instead of cooking at home and having those meals. And we tend to give what we didn't get in childhood. I didn't know what regular meals was. I set up my family like Father Knows Best. Y'all remember that show, Father Knows Best? The mother cooked, she kept a clean house. It was 2-story. I even found that 2-story house. With a 2-story house, I kept it neat, clean, spotless. You could eat off the floors if you wanted to. I don't know why you'd want to, but you could have at my house. And I wouldn't let the kids wear their shoes in the house. And, my mother-in-law thought she was going to turn me into Child Protective Services because I would let her grandkids, with their older ones, wear their shoes in the house. Well, we lived out in the country, and they'd get out and play, and I wanted them to, but I made them leave their shoes out on the front porch. That's how I kept the house clean. But anyway, the thing about it is it takes time, attention, and you really have to put some forethought into feeding children appropriately. 20% of every child in the United States is not just overweight, they're obese. Now you go down into 11 to 19% of them are overweight. 20% are obese. That is a high percentage of children that are obese. And I go back to, I think it is a form of child abuse to have food in the house for children that is not healthy, that they can get at any time of the day or night to feed themselves, and they have lots of it, and they can keep feeding themselves and keep feeding. An overweight child gets the food at home. There's no other place that they can get it. Now, I, as an overweight child, would steal food everywhere I went. We'd go to my mother's dear friend, Mrs. Howard's house. She always had a cake up under the cake taker. I knew she'd have a cake there. And they'd go out on the patio and be drinking beer, and I'd slip in there to go to the bathroom. And I had to go to the bathroom a lot because I'd slip in there and I'd get a sliver of that cake and a sliver of that cake, and then try to keep all of the crumbs cleaned up. And I would eat half of a cake while I was there. I was a volume eater. I ate lots of food as a child because what I was trying to fill up was that hole in my soul from the abuse as a child. So overweight children need to be fed appropriately at home. They need to be taught how to feed themselves appropriately. They need to be taught about food, what's healthy and what's not healthy. And that goes 100% on the parents and on the school. And if your child is, I know Obama, what's her name? Michelle tried her best to get food changed in the public schools. She was laughed at, she was scorned, she was put down because she was trying to get some kind of regulation into school programs where they could have fresh food, good, healthy food. And of course, they all, many people laughed at her and all that. But if you want to have a healthy society, start with what they eat. We are what we eat, whether we like it or not. We are what we eat. And if we don't feed ourselves healthy, or if we don't feed ourselves enough, Or if we overfeed ourselves, we are going to get sick over it. And so, if you have a child or you know a child that's overweight, look at that child, because it's not about the food. That kid is not eating about the food. That kid is eating over feelings. That child is eating over being made fun of. And the bigger you get, the more fun that you're made, And a lot of your obese kids will become like stand-up comedians. And my mother would always tell me, just laugh at what they say. Laugh and the world will laugh with you. Cry and you cry alone. That was her theme song. Laugh and the world will laugh with. I couldn't laugh with them when they were calling me names at all. It went to my heart and it stayed there. You can tell it stayed there a long time. All right, so another thing is get those kids moving. Get them out of the house. Get them away from those screens. Make it if you're raising kids, what I would say is make it at least 60 minutes a day. They're out of that house, away from the screens, and they're doing something active. Now, you might hear that and think, well, that's not a lot of time. It is a lot of time when kids are not getting out at all. Some of them come in from school, throw those school books down, get them something to eat, sit down in front of the whatever, and they don't budge until time to eat dinner, So get them outside. And the thing about it, don't just send them outside, get out there with them. That's another thing that Kim said. And after talking to Kim, I left feeling pretty good. She said, Mother, even though you were overweight, she said, you would get out and play with us. And, you try to chase us, and you couldn't catch any of us, but you would chase us. And she said, you would get outside with us, and you'd make us go outside and play. And they all played basketball, and I didn't know how to play basketball, but she said, Mother, you would guard us. You'd get out there, and, anyway. And she's told me, she said, give yourself some credit. She said, look at all 4 of your kids. You have raised wonderful kids, and not a one of them are overweight. That was my goal. So I guess God and me together, and I prayed daily that I would not have overweight kids. That might not mean much to you, but it meant a lot to me because of what I went through as a child. If you're a mother out there that's listening to this and you have overweight children, I hope you will get my phone number and call me or get my email. I would love to visit with you and give you some ideas of how to make it a family project to eat healthy meals and what to bring into that home and what not to bring into that home. If you're bringing in a lot of you're bringing a lot of you're bringing in poison. Now, I'm not saying don't give kids, don't be real restricted with it. There's a balance. There's a balance to everything. There is a balance. So, activity, affirmations, affirm your kids regardless of or no matter what. Affirm your kids for where they are. Never shame them about their weight. Never, ever shame them about their weight. And it's hard to talk about your children's weight. And by the grace of God, and I'll just keep saying this, I never had to talk to my kids about their weight. My son today, he probably is kind of maybe more, could be, I don't know if he could be more like me, but if he gains 5 to 10 pounds, he gets it off. He gets it right off. I have one daughter that has, kind of struggled with weight. And she's got it off, and but her weight didn't come on until her adult life, like going through divorce and all. So, and it was the food, and she'll tell you, it was not the divorce that caused her to gain the weight. It was the overeating, eating about the pain. So anyway, that's what I have, and recovery is so possible. Recovery is so possible. But if you have an overweight child, don't separate their eating. Don't put them over here with a bowl of cottage cheese and a little fruit and some meat. Do not serve them separate meals. Serve the whole family the same thing. Don't do diet food. Do food. Do real food. If you've got an overweight child, feed them real food and feed them everything. And I do not regret my kids will tell you they know how much to eat because I served everybody's plate, and it was really my motive there was to have enough to go around because the big teenage boys, they could clear. One time they were running a contest to see how many tacos they could eat, and I had cooked 84 tacos. And we ran out, and the boys had all these toothpicks because I'd made the tacos from scratch and put toothpicks in them to hold them. They had lined up all these toothpicks to represent the number of tacos that they ate. They were boys, they were active, and had no weight on them, so they could overeat in certain things like that. But the reason I served their plates was it wasn't for any reason other than to have enough to go around when you're feeding 9 people. And they all got plenty, I was big on not doing second servings. I didn't preach about it. If they were still hungry, I would say, now you can either have a second helping of this or you can have your dessert. You're not going to have both. So they'd go for the dessert, or usually. But it's, anyway, that's what I have about obesity with children. And it's going to take the entire family. We have had the pleasure, Kim and I have had the pleasure of working with some families that their children were anorexics, and it actually kept them out of long-term inpatient because these 2 young ladies that came to us at different times, and not all families will do this, but these families were willing to do this. And they were very severe. Their weight was compromised. They had been asked not to attend school until they addressed their anorexia. They were, lived 3 or 4 states away. They were not, friends or anything, but it was the same scenario. They lost their ability to play sports. They were severe anorexics. And what we told that family, and this is what I would tell a family that has an obese child, the parents are the tool. And so we got that family on board to eat every meal with their daughters for 1 year. And if they couldn't enlist the help of other family members, get grandparents in there, have meals at the table, have an adult sit with them at every meal, and have them learn to prepare, teach the anorexic how to prepare their own meals, make it a family, whether there's other kids, make it a family project, and don't single the anorexic out. Of course, they were singled out because they wasn't in school. These girls couldn't even go to school. Their weight was so compromised. But I want to tell you, both of these young women have graduated. They are in college. And I just got cold chill bumps thinking about it. But their parents do not give us any credit. That's what I tell the parents. Do not give us the credit. We just gave you the tools, and the parents did it. If you can get the parents engaged in helping a child, that child is going to get well. They are. And these parents got on board, and they got the grandparents on board, and they had to take time off of their jobs. One had to quit a job and get another job, so there could be a parent with these daughters at all times, and spend very little time up front with their peers, because peers are the worst to be around right at first when they are in this dangerous place of being refed, and so their other children got on board, and it helped the entire family. It didn't help just the one daughter. It helped all of them. They're in college now, and like I said, the family takes the credit. God and the family. We just taught them what to do, and they took it. We've taught other families, and families are not willing to do it. Well, I have to work. Well, their dad, their. When you have a very sick child, see, people will not take an obese child and look at them as being sick with a disease. But you let them weigh 70 pounds, that gets their attention. But an overweight child, they just kind of laugh at it. Well, roly-poly or whatever. This is serious stuff. That kid's going to die young. If an overweight child is not fed appropriately, the parents need to be turned in to Child Protective Services. And I'm not laughing about it. I think it is a form of child abuse to overfeed a child. That's what I have on adolescent and child obesity. Anyone? I mean, I've just gone on and on. Anyone have anything to say? Can you identify with any of this? Have you had obese children? Okay, Miss